When you're fighting oppression, who exactly is included in we? Today, we're going to dig into a really provocative 2023 critique of Steve Biko's Black consciousness movement. And it's one that challenges the very definition of Black and asks a tough question: were its founding ideals a compromise from the very start? To really get this, we have to start with a pivotal quote from BIKO himself. Back in 1972, he said the movement is for people who are oppressed. Now, that one statement frames Black consciousness not around race, but around a political identity. And as you're about to see, that core idea is exactly what's being challenged today. All right, so where is this modern challenge coming from? We're diving into a 2023 critique by the scholar Itumeleng Makale, who really goes back and re-examines the entire foundation of the Black consciousness movement. So the central argument is this: the Black consciousness movement just isn't African-centered enough. The author basically says that by defining itself around this wide-open concept of oppression, the movement actually weakened its own power. And the proposed fix? A huge shift away from BIKO's inclusive ideas and toward a much more explicit, race-focused ideology, all to better serve what the author sees as true African interests. You know, this whole argument that the movement should be more African-centered really just boils down to one single fundamental question: what does it actually mean to be Black? Because according to this critique, how you answer that question changes everything. It determines who the movement is actually for. And everything, I mean everything in this ideology hinges on the answer to this one question. How you define the word Black doesn't just decide who gets to be in the group, it dictates the movement's ultimate goals. It shapes its entire political destiny. And here you can see the two definitions side by side. On the left, you've got Biko's original idea: Black as a political identity. Now, this was a strategic move, right? It was meant to unite all non-white people crushed by apartheid: Africans, Indians, coloreds, all of them. But on the right is the author's alternative, a strictly race-centered term, where Black means, and only means, Africans. This isn't just a small debate over words, folks. This is a fundamental split in both strategy and vision. So, from the author's point of view, BIKO's wide-open definition has some really serious consequences. The argument is that it creates ideological confusion. I mean, if anyone who's oppressed can be Black, then what's so unique about the African people's struggle? This, the author says, weakens resistance by stopping a unified front based on race. It ends up decentering Africans from their own fight, and, in the author's view, even helps foreign imperialist interests by just muddying the waters of the whole liberation struggle. And look, according to this critique, we're not just talking about theory here. The author argues that these problems lead directly to a compromised vision for the future, a vision that was baked into the movement from day one. Okay, so the BCM's officials' stated goal was to create a raceless and egalitarian society. It's a vision of universal equality on African soil. Now, most people would probably see that as the ideal outcome, right? But the critique we're looking at, well, it sees things very, very differently. The author reframes that noble-sounding goal and calls it an inceptional compromise. The argument is that this vision wasn't some radical end goal at all. Instead, it was a deal made right at the beginning to make sure there was a liberal future for non-Afrikaans, rather than securing absolute, total sovereignty for the Afrikaan people. Okay, so if a raceless society is seen as a compromise, then what's the alternative? Well, the author proposes a radically different vision, one that is laser-focused on African sovereignty. And the proposed alternative is direct, it's unambiguous. African-centered sovereignty on the African soil. You see the shift? The goal isn't a raceless society built on shared oppression anymore. It's a sovereign society built on the principle of African self-determination. Now, to give this alternative some real philosophical muscle, the author introduces the concept of asili. It's a Kiswahili word that means seed or essence. And using an indigenous African term is a major point here. The idea is that the movement needs to be rooted in its own cultural and linguistic world, not just reacting to a colonial one. Asili is about the core, unique spirit of the African people. So this concept of afili becomes the new bedrock. Instead of uniting around shared political oppression, the author argues that the movement should rally around a shared spirito-cultural identity, a unique African essence and heritage. It's a total shift from a political coalition to a cultural and racial revival. And that leaves us with this one powerful question. How can the definition of a single word completely shape the destiny of an entire movement? It's a wild reminder that language is never, ever neutral. It doesn't just describe the world we live in, it actually draws the map for the future we're fighting to create.